welcome everybody to this Talent Manager Come Work With Us session with Emporium. Really pleased to be running the session with Emporium, which is such an interesting company and has done so much in incredibly short space of time. We're delighted to be joined by Emma Reid, who's obviously the founder and MD of Emporium, as an award-winning exec producer, was a commissioner at Sky and Discovery, head of factual at ITN, and set Emporium up 5 years ago. Also, we've got Sarah Stevenson, who is the head of development at Emporium, has worked there for quite a few years, started as a DV director and then has worked her way up through the ranks, being head of development. And also Simon Greenwood, who's SP, who's a freelance SP, but has been at Emporium for a couple of years, I think, is that right? And was working on Rich House, Poor House and Secrets of Supermarket Food. And so we're going to talk about that, those shows in particular a bit, but also generally about Emporium's programming, its approach, also about recruitment, what they're looking for, hopefully some tips and advice about people when they do get in for interview stage and do's and don'ts. And then also we're going to talk a little bit towards the end about how they see the situation developing now post COVID, what the impact on production is, where they see the sort of changes both in terms of the industry as a whole, but also content-wise, what they think people are going to be, commissioners are going to be looking for in the kind of tenor of the programs. So first of all, Emma, tell me a little bit. As I said, you've done a huge amount, a real range of factual programming, commissioning, obviously. What was your genesis for setting up Emporium? How did it come about? And what do you see your USP as an indie?
Hello, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. You're quite right. I have got quite a long past and done a huge amount of factual television, rising up through the ranks from trainee assistant film editor all the way to being an exec and a commissioner. And I started Emporium 5 years ago, having completed 5 years at ITN Productions, from ITN Productions inception, when it was amalgamated from various bits of the company. And we were, it's fair to say that when we started ITN Productions, led by Mark Browning, it was on its knees. And, that gave me an amazing background and training for how to set up my own production company. So when we made a huge amount of stuff there and made it very profitable within a few short years. And when Jimmy Mulville of Hat-Trick came to me and asked whether I might be interested in setting up my own production company, obviously with Hat-Trick as my partners, I thought about it quite hard. I went around the houses, seeing what kind of deals were out and what was the best way to do it. And I just thought to myself, well, do you know what? I've been there and I've done it, and I haven't done this. And if it works, brilliant. And if it doesn't, I'll go off and get a job again. And so we started in 2015 with 3 of us in one room in the Hat-Trick building in London. And we quite quickly, managed to get ourselves together and, come up with ideas that seemed to chime with broadcasters like lovely Channel 5, who I think are, the champions of small indies and factual telly in this country. None of us could survive without them. And I think that, it was thanks to them and also other channels like CBS Reality that we got started. And now 5 years later, last year in 2019, we delivered 60 hours of telly, and we're still a small production company. It was a huge amount of television to make, and it ranged from Rich House, Poor House, with the very able leadership of Simon and Rich Holiday, Paul Holiday. We did Secrets of Your Supermarket Food. We did an ITV show, 999, Britain from Above. We, lots of, we did Netflix. We did, we do a huge range of stuff with a huge range of broadcasters. And I'd say that our USP for anybody that's interested in working for us in terms of programs is we make factual telly. We love access, whether that's access to institutions or people or material, and how can we change that around and come up with ideas to deliver insight into the way that different institutions, businesses, organizations, people work. And we also love a format. We started doing the supermarket, Secrets of Your Supermarket Food, not last year, the year before, and found our way of how to do it, and that's become a good show, a good staple consumer show. So that's another string to our bow as well, is consumer telly. We also make a lot of very fast turnaround things when the need arises, when some terrible disaster hits the planet. I think that and we have a big background in crime as well, largely with great people like Donald McIntyre. So a lot of our shows are with presenters, but definitely not all. So I'd say that we're quite a broad church, but we probably could be best categorized as kind of really engaging telly for curious people that entertains and informs in a kind of quite like good values way, I would say. Yeah, we love information-rich telly.
Should we show a quick show reel? Shall I play that just so people can get a flavour? I think it does give a really good flavour of the breadth of. I mean, what's interesting about your stuff is both the breadth of it, but also to me there feels like an underlying sensibility to it. But shall I play the show reel quickly and then we?
It's 2 years out of date, I think, at least. But it does show. I mean, some of the shows we're still making because they're successful returners. But yeah, have a look.
Right. Let me see if I can.
See if you can click onto it.
Click on something and get it to.
Wow, look at them all. Why do men earn more than women? Sexism!
The proof really is in the eating. Well, let's get digging.
It was an experience that I will never forget, that will remain in my mind forever.
I'm going into a prison that has an international reputation of being one of the most dangerous prisons in the world. That was the first moment in my life where I really thought, is this the end?
How do I become part of this secret special society?
Smart, brother.
Put some crushed beetles in your pork sausage, please, there, Luca. Oh, that's great.
Women are strong, women are amazing, women need gender quotas.
Thank you, I agree with you.
I'm Donald McIntyre, and I'm on a quest to explore the dark side of our online world, where one click can lead to murder.
How do you feel about the fact that he is in prison for murder, rape of many girls and women?
At the very bottom of the sea, the mob descended. He had no chance. That's what we've done.
It reminded me of how hard you have to become to survive.
But we were looking for evidence of what happened to this plane, and there it is. The strafe.
She said to me, I have a date this evening. And I said, oh, that's exciting. Well, who worked? And she said, it's Harry.
No.
Don't touch that.
It's a bomb. 100%.
Come on. Who wants to?
William, we more the family.
Toda a família.
Right, now, will you bugger off?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it does. As I said, it gives you a real sense of the range of work that you do. But as I said, there does seem there is a very strong journalistic sensibility to them. And I mean, what I think is interesting, we're going to talk about Rich House, Poor House a bit. There is that feeling to it. On the one hand, it's one might say it's a fairly conventional format in many ways, but there seems to me more to it than that in terms of what you get from it. Was that a deliberate approach of yours with it?
With Rich House, Poor House?
Yeah.
Simon, why don't you talk about Rich House, Poor House?
Yeah, okay, sure. I mean, we inherited Rich House, Poor House. It's a program about people who have maybe lack of opportunity. It's about the class system. And in terms of how we kind of people it, I suppose, we are always looking, and we're hoping that the next series, I don't know if I can say this, is about to be greenlit. We're sort of at the discussion stage. Is that fair to say, Emma? So if we do make another series of it, then we'll be looking to staff it with people who can relate to people from all walks of life. It could be, if we're careful, we don't want to make a program about rich people wagging their finger at poor people. It's got to be about a lot more than that. It's much more sort of story produced, and it's much more interesting. It's a very interesting program to make. It's actually, logistically it's quite tricky, but in terms of the editorial, it's fascinating. And every story in every family, as Tolstoy I think once said, is different. I'm paraphrasing. There's no such thing as happy families. And the people that work on it have to be able to kind of relate to people from all walks of life. So yeah, it's a fascinating program to make, and always surprises us, I would say.
And probably more relevant with what's coming up in this country as all the economic stimuli end with the COVID. The idea of the wealth divide and the impact that has on individuals, and the choices that they have in life, and the limits that puts on them, and how sometimes the rich families can come in, and it's not just about what they learn for themselves, but they can sometimes help those poorer families to just that week away to break out of the cycle of desperation, really, for some people. Because what's really quite shocking, and I think that the program is really good at revealing it, is the actual reality of low income and debt. And as we've been making the series, increasingly we find that people have their drawer of debt. People, we open drawers and find endless bills that they just put away in the drawer because they just can't cope with the enormity of what they're being asked to pay. And these individual human tragedies are played out quite well through Rich House, Poor House. These are traditional current affairs documentary subjects, things we should all care about. And I think that a lot of people stop, think about it, pay some attention, thanks to this swap format that successfully encapsulates modern Britain.
They make real connections, don't they, as well? The families, I know the casting team make real effort to kind of find families that will make sense together. And, they really do have an impact on each other's lives even after filming ends, which I think is quite amazing if you can kind of make real change to people's lives through telly.
Well, it was interesting the other day on Sunday, I saw in the paper that they were repeating a show. Oh my God, I haven't told the contributors, I haven't been in touch with them. So we got in touch because we didn't know. And we got in touch with the contributors and who we filmed last May, I think. And we got in touch with them, and she said, I'm just spending the evening with Claire. And these two women from very opposite ends of the spectrum have become firm friends through the program. And, individually that was changing their lives as well. So it was really lovely. And, other families, lots of great things have happened to them through the relationship with their swap family as well, like starting their own businesses, being able to break free and learning how to pay off their debt. And for the rich families, you know, gaining new friends, gaining insights into their own lives, especially, which is a big one.
Well, I mean, one thing that strikes me about it is it does have a real warmth to it, which, I mean, you know, in contrast to, you know, a wife swap of 10 or 15 years ago, where it was very much about a sort of sense of conflict. There is a warmth. There is a warmth about it. Was that a very deliberate decision of yours to make it like that? Or is it something that's not naturally evolved?
Well, I think we're dealing with people on the human level. You know, we're not swapping people to achieve conflict. We're swapping people to achieve some insight and understanding, both for the families involved, but also for the audience.
Well, so I mean, how do you go? You mentioned about the casting of it. So how do you go about casting it? What's the process?
Simon's the best person to answer that, I'm afraid. That's a whole juggernaut that I'm not part of.
We have a big casting team, Matt, who put the program together for us, and we use social media and street casting, and the families are targeted, and it's a big part. I mean, the casting team are a very, very big part of what we do, and really we live and die by the casting, because if we get the casting wrong, it's actually quite a hard program to make. If you get the casting right, and both families, and you talk about the conflict, there is some conflict in it, but we want it to be kind of conflict for the family within themselves, so they go on a bit of a journey that week, and we do naturally want it to be a good experience for all of them, and we just have to find the right people who are basically ready to kind of learn something and have fun with it, and allow us to make them swap houses with somebody else for 6 or 7 days. You know, it's quite a big undertaking, so it's a very carefully cast. And I play very little role in it. I mean, I'm just very grateful to the casting people we have, basically.
Our casting team is ably led by Emma Parsons and Donna Harry, and they do a brilliant job.
And then, sorry, go on.
No, I was saying it's a huge part of what we do, and then we would, you know, we will. There are sort of jobs in that area as well that will be coming up. You know, once we do hopefully start again, it's a very important area for us.
And then what's the setup in terms of the actual production team? When you go, how many shooting teams do you have? And
yeah, so because it's a swap, we have, you know, 2 PDs, 2 shooting APs, and runners as well. So they tend to be 3 people teams, and we all get together and we kind of work on the program together for a couple of weeks and story produce and set things up and spend a lot of time talking to the family. This is after the casting team has spent quite a lot of time with them, and go and film for 6 or 7 days in a row, and then hand over to the edit, and then we move on to the next one. So they're quite intense periods. They're quite tricky in some ways for PDs and APs, because you don't get to go back again at the end of the 7 days. You know, it's not like, oh, let's go and have a think about this and where we went wrong. We have to kind of get it on those 7 days. It's a swap program, and that is a challenge. But you know, we hire people who are up for that, and you know, good. It's probably 7 days can be a bit, you know, can be quite tiring. You know, it's a bit of a slog, and you've got to be on your game for 7 days. So we're always looking for people who are, and it sounds such a cliche, but really great with people. You know, producer directors have that kind of chameleon-like ability to basically, if they're with the rich family and they have to blend in with them, or they're with the lower income family, they can relate to them, empathize with them, talk to them, you know, be friends with them. And I've seen a couple of APs working their magic off camera with people that then relates to a scene later on. And it's often people who give quite a lot of themselves. And we all live in families, and none of our families are perfect. And it's about family life. And the more you give of yourself, the better the program is, you know, and we encourage that. In that way, that's why I say editorially, it's quite an interesting and fun program, very, you know, great program to make, and really good for people who want to be documentary program makers who are already either doing it or that's where they're heading towards, because that's what it is at its heart. It is a format, but the real kind of nuts and bolts of the making of the show is that 7 days where, you know, and there's not that many, Emma might correct me, but you don't get that many chances to do that, you know, and it's a bit, in that way, it's a challenging one, but a bit of a privilege, you know.
I think it also calls upon people to really have a 360 approach to their craft. So, for instance, you know, as Simon says, you don't get to go back And you can't just think about it as you go along. You know, obviously you have to be flexible and you always have to be able to react to something, but you can only really do that if you've written a script beforehand or an outline. You know exactly what you're going to do on what day. You've planned it, because you're effectively, and it is a really nice opportunity for people, because you're effectively making a half-hour show about your family's experience of being in that house. We then obviously intercut the two things, but you have to come at it with that approach. What is their journey? What is their kind of storyline through it? How are you developing each character? How are you developing each storyline? So that's a unique opportunity in today's television, I think, to really grab hold of something and see it as a whole, rather than see yourself as part of a jigsaw. Because if you see it like that, that's actually quite hard. And I think, you know, people need to, you know, when they're making programs, always think about the scene, what's it doing, what's its purpose within a wider program frame, no matter what the show. And it's a sort of discipline that I think we should all impose on ourselves. You know, many years ago, when they started on film and we were given, you know, 5 or 6 reels of film for a half-hour show, you had to make sure you had planned it properly. And I think that nowadays people would be happier and understand the whole storytelling and devices if they imposed upon themselves that idea of ruthlessly planning and plotting and working out the narratives of each storyline and character. And then when something goes disastrously wrong, as it always does, or people don't, you know, do what you hope they were going to do, or react in a way you hope they were going to react, because you're so well planned, you can instantly change, you know, where you're going, because you've got your parameters that you've set out for yourself. So I think we do encourage people to do that, don't we, Simon?
We do. We plan very meticulously and have, you know, there's a lot of time spent on the phone, either with the casting team and then the production team with the family. So it's very well plotted. But then I think where the story producing on the sort of location comes in is it's often the hard things. It's the hard stuff that's the interesting stuff. So it's often the things they don't want to tell you that are the really interesting parts of the story. And that's where the kind of skill comes in. It's basically, as I say, empathizing with them and making friends with them and getting them to trust you. And you said it's kind of a nice program. In a way, getting them to remember that actually we're trying to do something great here for them and for other people watching the show, rather than some, you know, and those programs have their place, wife swap, where it's sort of big row at the end. It's not about that. So there is a kind of greater good for them, but the more they give to us, the better it will be for them and better it is for the audience, the better show we make. So it's those people skills really I go back to. It's storytelling and people skills. If you've got those things and you can shoot a bit, then, you know, we'll probably want to work with you.
How do you go about, I mean, assessment, we talked about it before, and it obviously industry-wide is an issue where so often now with the specialism and DV directors and shooting APs and people that aren't getting the chance to get into an edit to really learn those storytelling skills. So how do you go about assessing it? How do you go about trying to get people to develop it if you've got somebody who perhaps is less experienced?
I mean, that is an industry-wide problem. I totally hear you. I mean, we go through quite a rigorous, and I'm a bit of a bore about this. I used to kind of go on my instincts with interviews and just, you know, to think that if I didn't get somebody quite right, I'd be able to kind of shepherd them through the process. I'm actually very careful about, you know, the old interview referencing process, and interview people very carefully and take quite a lot of time over it to get the right people, because I just want the right person for the job. They're going to enjoy it and they're going to get something out of it. So I suppose we're quite careful how we choose people, and then really we give them their head. Really, we allow them to just get on with it and talk to them about the kind of whole process, work out whether they're able to do it. We have thrown a few people in at the deep end, but only when we've got fantastic references for them, and often they've proved themselves. I mean, funny enough, the story I was talking about the AP was an AP who I noticed was amazing with the contributors and really good storyteller, and we bumped her up to PD that series because we knew that she could do it. It was a bit of a risk because she, you know, she might not have done, but she did, you know, and she's now, you know, a very established PD already, you know. So it's kind of, there are people that do struggle with it, but we help them, and there's a whole team of people that help them with that. And of course there's many people in the edit producers are very experienced, so they meet the edit team as well. So there's a whole kind of, it's not like a kind of a them and us situation. I think that's really important with television as well. because a lot of PDs don't. And you know, I started as a PD and got in the edit and was thoroughly bollocked by my editor for not getting him enough cutaways, you know, and of course I learned very quickly that I didn't want that to happen to me again. And they don't have that process, which is really tough for them. But we help them in other ways, and we look at footage and we share things, and we try and help them as much as we can.
And I would say if you are, you know, an AP or a DV director, then, or indeed the PD, who, you know, because of the way that budgets and schedules are structured and the way that the industry seems to work nowadays, don't get to go into that edit, then take the time to go and sit in the edit. You know, it's, you know, no production company is going to mind if you say, can I come and sit in the edit? No one's going to mind if you say, can I come and have a look at my rushes? No one's going to mind if you ask questions. And if you're ever in doubt, ask, because we want to get it right and we want you to get it right. So we are always happy to guide and to help and to support people through the process. I mean, you know, we were talking about this earlier. My biggest bugbear in television at the moment, and the biggest hindrance to people developing their careers, is the way that we no longer have the money, the resources and the time to enable people to start off researching and then going out and shooting and then taking what they've shot into the edit in, you know, short pieces. And it doesn't happen nearly enough. And it means that we are separating the people who do the shooting from the people who do the editing. And if you don't go through that bollocking mode, as Simon just described it, you know, I remember when I was learning, I had very fierce film editors who would, you know, tell me exactly what I was doing wrong, and I did not do it again because it was quite humiliating. But you take it on the chin and you learn from it. And I think it's really, you know, it's a real shame nowadays that we you know, the price for an edit producer is less than the price for a PD because they can operate a camera or whatever, and there's that separation. Because if you have been in an edit, you understand all the stuff you need to tell a great story, and you know, why wouldn't you want those two things to go together? So we do try and make that happen for people, but it's not universally possible, often because of curtailed shooting production schedules, or just, you know, the rates that broadcasters allow or whatever. And my you know, I have a particular bee in my bonnet about this, and I would say to broadcasters that universally, if they wish to move people up a ladder, develop skills universally across television, then they need to be enabling production companies to help people develop through the process. And equally, you know, we need to take it on ourselves as well. You know, I spent many hours watching. I was very fortunate. I had a partner who was a director, and I used to watch him endlessly in the studio, directing the studio. And I learned how to studio direct just by watching. And then when it was my turn, you know, I went, oh, I can do that, I can do that. And they let me have a go, foolishly. But I kind of, it was dead scary, but I knew what to do. And I think, so, you know, you have to grab every opportunity you can. If you've got a mate that's doing something, ask them if you can tag along. Go and sit and watch you know, somebody who's really great interviewing somebody. You know, interviewing is a skill. Oh my God, you know, dragging stuff out of somebody's head and into your camera. That's an amazing thing to be able to do, but it doesn't just come like that. You have to practice it.
That's something as well, like with development, isn't it, Emma? Like, we try to be as open as we can at Emporium. You know, we want people to see that whole process, because often if you're a PD coming or you're freelancing, you don't get to see that genesis of ideas. And that's something that we kind of actively encourage, and we do kind of at least, well, once we were kind of in the office, but we're still doing it over Zoom now, kind of every now and then, or at least once a month, kind of a big company-wide brainstorm. So all the teams that are working on Rich House, Poor House or supermarkets come and join the development team for a kind of a themed brainstorm about, could be about anything, about property or like a new farming show, whatever it is that we kind of think broadcasters are after. And you have a few drinks and it's some fun to kind of give people that creative release. And I think that's important as well. And, you know, I've been at lots of companies where it's always felt quite separated. And I think we do try hard at Emporium to bring everyone together as much as we can to kind of share those skills.
And also, Sarah, you know, you take on inexperienced researchers, APs, and, you know, development's a great place for them to learn how to research and do all those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think you think like we take curious people, don't we? You know, if you're passionate and determined, and you know, that's kind of the people that we look for.
What I mean, you've got, I mean, yeah, Sarah being a case in point, but you know, you do, as you say, like to nurture people and bring them through and keep them with you. What are those key qualities, I suppose, that those people need to show? Enthusiasm,
passion, a deep curiosity about everything. Like I'm a kind of info hoarder in my brain, as everyone who knows me knows. You know, I just love knowing about things and understanding loads of different things. I probably know a great deal about a tiny amount of stuff, but a little about a lot, if that's the right way around, probably. Yes, get my words right. But I think so. We need very curious people. We like people who enjoy talking to people. You know, that's quite important. You know, we make a lot of access shows, and you know, if you heard Sarah on the phone to people, you'd understand, you know, what we do for a living. It's about making great relationships with the people that we're going to make programs with, we hope. And that all starts with that first phone call. That starts with doing your research, having the background to it. So we're interested in, so we don't, you know, when we take on a researcher or something, we don't necessarily need them to have tons and tons of experience at a particular thing. But what we do need them to do is watch tons of telly, really understand and be interested in telly, be interested in life, read like 5 newspapers a day. And I don't care what their background is. I just want them to be really curious, well-informed people who want to tell great stories and also know how to tell stories, because you know we'll show them how to do it televisually, but if you're great at passing a bit of gossip on, you know, I think if you meet someone in the street and by the time you walk away from them you've managed to extract most of their personal details, then we're the sort of company that would like to hear from you, because if you're curious and, well, I suppose another way of putting it is nosy, then you know that's a great asset in television program making, because we're communicators and entertainers, and you know the whole thing is can you take a bit of information, work out how to put it across and then disseminate it, then fab, you know, that's telly. You know, we're a craft more than anything else, and it's a bit like making a beautiful you know, sculpture, isn't it, in the end? I suppose, to be a bit poncy about it. But I think that what else do we like in people? We like hard workers too, because someone that, you know, arrives on the dot and leaves on the dot, fine, that's what your contract says. But you know, if you're reading the papers at 9 o'clock at night and you suddenly think of an idea, or you suddenly see something and you want to share it with people, or maybe you're working with people in America and you're able to be flexible, and you know, after you put the kids to bed, you don't mind having a quick call with somebody because you want to. You know, it's very important for me. Telly is all consuming. It's all I can do. It's all I've ever done, and I love it. And I want people to work for me who also love telly and love communicating and giving people an insight into different worlds and different lives. And how amazing is that, to be able to be taken on a trip into somebody else's life? It's such a privilege.
That's what I was going to say, Emma. I think for us, it's a big thing about people that think working in this industry is a privilege. That's a big thing for me, because it is. And I always want people that are as kind of passionate and as proud. I'm so proud of what I do. And I think that's what we want, people that are proud of it and feel that it's a privilege. It's not just a job. It is what we live and breathe. I don't know what else I would do.
Well, I mean, if you find somebody, how much autonomy do you have to appoint people with shows? How much do the channels, I mean, there are obviously some channels who may remain nameless, who are very micromanaging about who you appoint on a production. I mean, you obviously do a lot for Channel 5, Netflix. How much freedom do you have in putting your teams together?
I'd say that, you know, it's quite normal to share that with a channel when it comes to series producers. And if you were making a documentary series, you know, I see life and television as a collaboration, so I would never sort of be completely negative, but equally, if I believed in the person that I wanted, and which hopefully I do, if I'm talking about appointing them, then, you know, you put your case across, don't you? I think that one big thing is it's not just about who can do a job, it's also about who can work with the team, and but they both count.
Do you, but I mean, in terms of something like Rich House, Poor House, or supermarkets, or will the channel want sign off on the PDs? I mean,
no. I mean, I mean, I'm bound to say it's probably because I work for Channel 5 quite a lot, but the Channel 5 commissioners help us make the show, and we're very collaborative with them, but they largely let us get on with appointing the right people, you know, so that's really down to us. I mean, I think if there was a new exec or a new SP, I think they'd certainly want to have a say in that. But the PD, the AP, and the story producers, it's down to us really. As long as we're delivering the programs they like, they would let us know if they weren't happy with the show. So you know, they would make that really clear to us. So yeah, it's down to us really.
We're also, you know, we're the ones being paid to make the program and deliver the program to them. So you know, channels like Channel 5 are interesting because they have very few commissioning editors, and they have a huge output. So, you know, they really want to make sure that we're all on the same page with making a program. And I find them extremely easy to work with. But they're not going to worry about who the researcher is or who the PD is when they trust you as a company to deliver. But of course, you know, we wouldn't appoint a series producer if they said, no, we really don't want to work with this person, because they may have a particular reason. But we'd fight back, we would say what we believed. But, you know, that's part of the appointment process, isn't it, in the first place, I think.
Yeah. Well, so roles-wise, what are the things I mean, across your slate, what are the roles you typically find hardest to fill?
Well, I think that the challenge for production companies is at every single level, and it's not because there aren't some brilliant people out there, because there are lots of brilliant people out there. It's more, it's incumbent on us to persuade them to come and work with us. And I think that in terms of skills gaps, as I say, I think that there's a generation of producer directors who I would love to get into an edit, because I think it would really help them.
Yeah.
But you know, that's not the case at the moment with a lot of shows.
It's quite interesting comment here from somebody saying that they've asked, almost every time I've asked to sit in an edit, even for a few hours, I've been declined. This isn't with you. I mean, I'm
looking who that is, but
not with you. But I'm saying, what advice? Just be more persistent.
I would say, what?
Huh?
I mean, I do think that, you know, telly is can be an interesting collection of personalities, can't it? Yeah. So anyway, well, if you come and work with us, I won't say your name, then you would be allowed to sit in an edit.
It shouldn't be a them and us situation. I mean, I was going to say finding good edit producers is actually can be quite tricky, because it's actually really, I think I've done a bit of it myself. It's probably one of the harder jobs, and really good producers who can shoot well are, you know, they're hard to, they're not saying that they're not out there, they are, but we look for them very carefully because they're such important roles. And, you know, on a program like Rich House, they've got 6 days to shoot, and, you know, if we get the rushes back on the terrible, we really are in trouble, you know. So those are probably the hardest people to find, but we're always looking for people on all levels. Casting people are really important to us. We're talking about those people skills that Emma was talking about. I mean, you know, they're quite fun to go out with the casting team, because they're all really great at talking to people and talking to us, and, you know, and finding out stuff about our lives as well. They tend to be really, really good at that. So everyone, in a way, the whole thing is important. But we're looking for people who are story producers, really, who love telling stories, and then kind of the other stuff working with us, we can we can sort of work with them and train them up, if you like, and we can learn from them, they can learn from us. If they've got those skills, then we tend to want to work with them.
I think we want team players, don't we, as well? That's a big thing for us. You know, I mean, even in my team with development, it's that, you know, that the runner and the researcher and the producer, all the way up, you know, everybody's kind of role is just important, and you want everyone to kind of talk and collaborate. And that's, you know, what I like in my team, and I'm sure same with, you know, Simon and his team, and Emma kind of leads that by example. That's what we want. We want people to, that we're in it together. It's not one person making the show all on their own, and it shouldn't be. But it should be a success that we kind of all share and enjoy it. And I think that's always an important thing for me. People that play nice is something that we want.
Sarah, talk about, you know, development and how we bring people on and how great it is as a way to develop an understanding of storytelling.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, you know, I'm kind of, you know, been a shooting PD, and, you know, Emma gave me my first PD job and kind of supported me through that. And, you know, definitely, as, you know, having had that kind of luxury through my career of being able to kind of learn on the job and have someone to kind of mentor me through those skills is something that I always want to kind of offer to our development team. Like I'm always saying, you know, we take people that might not have, you know, tons of experience, but are really curious and kind of are really nosy people that listen. So, you know, they might have been asked to call somebody about X, and while they were on the phone, they found out that, I don't know, they've building a boat and they're setting 1,000 chickens on it, and they suddenly think, oh, that's a really weird story, but that might be a fun thing to make a show about. You know, people that kind of engage with that, and that's kind of what we're after, because that you can't teach. I can't teach people to be that, but I can teach people how to shoot. I can teach people, you know, how to script, and that's something that I definitely do in development, because a lot of like tasters and things we make are almost kind of like a mini 3-minute segment of a show, because you've got to think, right, I've got to sell this. It's almost like a pre-title, so what do I need to sell it? And, you know, I offer that kind of opportunity to my team, and I hope they'd say that, but I say, okay, well, why don't you write what you think are the beats, and then what, you know, what kind of points we need to get across, and then we'll write that shooting script together. And I know how long that will take to film, but they won't. So it's kind of working out, okay, we've got 2 days to film with this person on location, let's break it down. And I think that is something that I had an opportunity to do, because I did a lot of obs doc back in the day, and I lived on location for a long time, but, you know, schedules and budgets don't allow for that anymore, and everything's kind of squashed together. So that's something in development that, because of what we do, it's access to people and, you know, trying to kind of get to the core of why they're fascinating, that we kind of encourage people to do. And yeah, I've kind of like done like some camera courses, and I've got the team to kind of film each other, and then we've looked through rushes and kind of looked at that, and I hope that that's quite a unique thing that people offer.
I think development is a great place for people to spend some time, because it really hones their skills. And the one thing we haven't said here, of course, about television is that it's a creative industry, and, you know, ideas, if only more people had more ideas. We spend a lot of time talking about skills and about, you know, all the rest of it, but we are also ideas people, and I think that no idea is a bad idea, because there's always something else that might come out of it. And I you know, well, as Sarah said, we like to have big development free-for-alls, and I want to kind of enable people to free up their brains a little bit, to just have kind of crazy thoughts, and because a crazy thought can lead to a really interesting program. You know, very rarely does any thought that any of us have end up exactly in that form, you know, as a television program. But you know, I think it's very important to put up your hand and say, what about this? What about that? Because nobody minds people saying ideas, and it's a brilliant way to sort of advance your own brain and your way of thinking, is to just open it up a bit, which sounds a bit weird, but it's true. That's what telly is, because if you keep doing the same thing day in, day out, A, it's boring, and B, you'll end up making boring telly because you're thinking in a boring way.
I think that's important. Definitely, like Emporium as a team, we're not like, and it's fine, that's how some production companies, you know, some indies run, that it's these are the execs' ideas and they're the ideas that the team are developing. That's not how we work. I know we're it's true, it happens, I've heard, but we're much more collaborative than that. We'll have kind of the whole team, we'll all sit down together. We've been doing it over Zoom, and I might kind of throw some kind of ideas out of what we're talking around, but then it's a free-for-all, and everybody goes, oh, what about this? Or if we, you know, said it outside, or kind of gave them a dog to look after, you know, and everybody's idea is valid, and I think we really encourage that, which is nice.
It's quite difficult at the moment because you know, obviously with the whole COVID situation, everyone's working remotely, but it will change. And when it does, and people are working back in offices and able to have that kind of passing by a desk, have a chat, have an idea, you know, it's a vital part of television, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one question I had, and I actually want to ask, we're getting quite a few questions coming through. How big is your development team? And also, do you have a dedicated development team, or is it within the company, which I know not a lot of companies do, is they rotate people around? So perhaps, you know, PD or an AP who's maybe on they want to keep within the company, they give a short stint of development work for.
Well, we would if we desperately wanted to keep somebody, but we're quite a small company as well. So we expand according to what programs we're making. I noticed somebody has asked that people get their ideas stolen, and you know, collaborations can be quite difficult if that's the situation. But you know, lots of companies like us have a way to deal with that in terms of, I won't go into all the details now, but you know, in terms of getting people to work on ideas and you know, all the rest of it. But I think that the one thing I would say is that nearly every single television program I have ever worked on in a very long time of being in telly, multiple decades of telly, is that there is no such thing as an original idea. And you know, there really isn't. There's a twist, there's a quirk, there's a, you know, we're going back round again on all sorts of things on television. So I think our challenge is to say, okay, that's a really interesting area. Oh, that's an interesting quirky approach to that. And then collaboratively to be able to work together to find a great way through it that's new for today. You know, there's a lot of telly been made. Yeah. About a lot of stuff.
We have with some of our
exciting.
We have with some of our development team, I mean, not on every production, but on some productions, we've moved people from the development team that have been with us a long time, you know, kind of onto production to kind of learn those skills as well. If we've helped grow them, so if we've had somebody that's come with us and, you know, through development has kind of perfected their shooting skills and they can go out to kind of help on productions, or if it's if it's an access-driven series and that relationship's important, then, you know, that's something that where possible, you know, we have done that in the past, and I think that's great as well as an opportunity to kind of to see something through. And you know, like development can be exhausting. I love it, but it's tough sometimes. And if you know, there's not always that kind of like, oh, I finished it and now it's on telly. It's a bit relentless. So sometimes, you know, I think particularly for you know, people coming up the ranks, that once you've been doing it a while and you think, gosh, is anything going to get on telly? It's quite nice to actually go and make something that you've developed. And I think that we've offered that opportunity several times to some of our team, haven't we?
Yeah, quite often with ideas, it's right place, right time. And it can be a bit soul destroying when 90% hit the decks.
We're getting there. We'll get there.
We're getting lots of questions in, so I'm going to fire some of these questions at you, and then just a reminder to people, if you do have questions, it's much easier if you can put them in the Q&A box rather than in the chat box. But I will try and address some of these. So Bushra asks, you mentioned you work a fair amount with shooting PDs, DV directors, APs. I'd be interested to know whether it works the other way around with people that don't shoot as much. Are you interested in PDs with strong editorial and journalistic experience? I suppose it depends on the show, but what would you say to that?
It depends on the show. So, you know, various shows have different needs for different things. So, you know, if you were doing a big rig show, obviously there's not the need as much for shooters on a show like that. They're more story producers and journalists. You know, if I felt that somebody was just amazing at getting a story and we could put a good shooting DV person with them, then that's sometimes a solution. It is it depends on the program 100%, and it does depend on the person and their skills and ability, I would say. I think you know, there's a lot of, sadly, often because of the opportunities available, sadly because of the fact that it means going away a lot, because of the weight of the cameras, because of different things. Sometimes a lot of shooters I find are men, and obviously as a woman, and who's fought long and hard on behalf of myself and other women throughout my long career. It can be really hard to get those opportunities, and you find that more edit producers are women and more PDs are men, and then there's a salary deficit. So how do we encourage women that want to be at the genesis of the idea and the shooting stage to be able to do that? You know, it just so happens that we're at that cycle in television that you need, you know, we don't have as many camera operator television programs where you have a producer going out with a sound person and a camera person, and so, which is, you know, how it was back in the day, a long time ago. But equally, there's if you are somebody that wants to skill up all the way around as a woman, there's some great new cameras coming, and I'm not somebody who thinks that if you can't use every last, you know, super duper lens going and this camera and that camera, there's fabulous cameras. What's the name of that camera, Sarah? The
Oh no, the new, it's like the new PMW, but it's the PXW Z200.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant, and it's small and neat and compact, and you know, you get great pictures with it. It's 4K, it's lovely, and it's really, and what I love about cameras like that is they're very discreet. And when you're making obdocs with people, and you really don't want a giant camera. You know, I have some crews who are brilliant, and they go off and work in very difficult places for me, but they do love a gadget. And so, you know, I remember looking out of my window one day and seeing these guys, these huge, great things with the camera suspended underneath and whatever. I'm thinking, no one will know you're there. So
it doesn't put people at ease, does it?
It's about skills. It's about talent for extracting the story.
A slightly related question was, Richard Walker asked, will the role of a shooting researcher be needed after lockdown? Will only PDs shoot in such small crews? And I've got a related thing to that, I suppose, which is, I mean, for Simon or any of you, when you are interviewing people for shooting roles, are you looking at their rushes? Are you looking at a show reel, their finished programs? What would you expect to be shown?
I mean, I personally like to look at kind of not show reels really. I look at their finished pieces, or and I think if I'm working with people, we go through their rushes certainly. And there are roles. I mean, we say shooting AP. Really, we're looking for the AP is a story producer who also is able to shoot. So if that person happened to be a researcher, then we certainly wouldn't ignore that. But people on Rich House and other programs we make, often the AP or researcher will get the chance to shoot a second camera, and they may be cross shooting, and then we sort of build up their skills. We look at their rushes, and then we start to build up the skills. And if they do well, then we give them more to shoot, and we work out through the team, you know. And as I say, a couple of people who were APs ended up as PDs on the series.
In terms of social distancing, very importantly at the moment, that what Richard has asked, just looking at the name there, is that I think that things will change. I think that when things are being shot and you need separate cars for everyone to travel in, you know, etc., it's likely that the 2 meter rule will be eliminated and will be down to 1 meter. But even so, you know, we have guidelines, as every good producer should have, and we have very strict health and safety and COVID safety rules, and it will affect how many people can be in a space together, because it's the safety of the crew, it's the safety of our contributors. So I think that there will be different practices involved in making television programs for the next year. That is for certain. But you know, I like to think positively about these things, because otherwise we'd all, you know, get very fed up. And I think there are opportunities for people for shooting researchers. Great, what a fantastic skill! You can research and you can shoot. Then, you know, that is a real asset, and there will be lots and lots of opportunities for people who want to show initiative and say, I'll do it, give me an opportunity, give me a chance, I'll do it, because that's how you will get on. And it's true that, you know, if you're shooting with, in a living room with 4 people, and how many other people can you get in there before you're, endangering people's health? And making people very nervous. So there will be different ways of doing things. It may be that people start using more mini rigs, that we start using one person in the room and somebody else in another room monitoring or whatever. But yeah, there will be different ways of doing things, that's for sure. But I don't think we're about to see the elimination of roles in quite such a wholesale way. I think that flexibility with skills will be important.
Are you seeing already, I mean, the budget impacts of coming down from commissioners in terms of the programs you're making? And then what is the impact for you in terms of how you're thinking about the productions? Are you having to condense your shooting periods, time in the edit, or getting people to double up?
It's different on every show, and I think that it's incumbent on us as production companies to say, okay, if that's the money that we're being given, how can we make a show for that money, instead of thinking, how can I make the show, if it's a recommission, how can I make the show I made before for that money? I can't, but we should be thinking about it in different ways. And I think that, you're asking a question of me as a company owner, and every company owner will be thinking this. They'll be thinking, okay, how do I work out ways of creating fab telly, but on more slender budgets? And that's up to me to work that out, really, without exploiting and knackering people, including myself.
That is the worry, isn't it? That obviously it's just going to put more stress on everybody. A lot of the commissioners will just pass this responsibility on down the chain.
Well, that's incumbent upon us all to say, okay, let's be imaginative. So if we're not going to shoot, I won't say what program, but obviously with the lack of ability to stay overnight in hotels and all the rest of it, I'm starting to think about having teams in different parts of the country, and then we have to think about how we might communicate adequately, because this is my biggest worry, is that here we are, we're all on Zoom, we're all communicating, but when you're trying to get a show up and running and you're all working towards one studio day or something and getting all the props and everything, how is that all going to work if you haven't got a central hub? So I think that one thing that we'll all be gradually moving back towards being in an office, but how do we do that safely? It is fraught with difficulties, that's for sure, and it requires a great deal of imagination and pragmatism. And also, I think everybody on the team needs to understand that and not just go, well, that's my job is to count those beans, and that's my job is to hold that camera. Then we can't work like that anymore. Everyone's got to be a little bit more flexible and roll their sleeves up, because that way I think people feel invested in the shows more, and it's a brilliant way of developing more skills too.
I'm conscious of the time, so we're getting lots of questions. I'm going to fire off a couple of more questions, and then we may need to wrap up. So Amina is asking, it's about development, about that question of how do you break into development, that she's found that often you need to have development credits, and despite having done training at the NFTS, I wanted to get into development on a junior level, she's found it very hard to break in. What advice would you give, Sarah, for somebody?
It's not the case with us, if it's somebody that, has done a kind of course or, doesn't have any kind of development credits before, then that wouldn't, put me off from hiring them, as long as, all the other stuff we've said about being kind of curious and coming with ideas, nothing frustrates Emma and I more than if we bring people in for interview and they've got all these lovely credits on their CV, but they didn't bring in any ideas of stuff they'd like to develop. That I find quite frustrating. If you're coming in for a chat about development, come in with some thoughts about things you've always wanted to make or places you've always wanted to go, because that's what I want to know that you're interested in. So yeah, it's not an issue for us.
Simon, or Em, this may be one for you. Daria asking specifically, and we talked a bit about the importance of casting for most shows, but particularly things like Rich House, Poor House. What specific experience would you look for somebody as a casting, if you were looking to hire somebody as a casting researcher? Is it them having specific credits, worked on particular shows, or is it, as you say, more a sense of them as a person?
It's both, really. I mean, we had some really experienced casting people, but I think we would interview somebody who had less experience if we thought they were the right person for the job. I mean, I noticed, for example, with development, when a young woman came in and sort of joined in the development discussion one day. I think she'd come in for an interview, and she came and stayed for one of the development meetings and was brilliant in the meeting. And we all knew at the end of it that she was somebody we probably want to hire. Similar with casting, really, we'll kind of have a good interview process with them, and if we think they're the right person, we'll probably give them a shot. Give them maybe a short contract and try and look after them and make sure they're looked after in the beginning and take it from there. I mean, obviously experience is really helpful, but it's a chicken and egg thing. Some people don't get experience, and if you don't get the chance, and casting is it's about having those great people skills. So if they've got those, then we may very well give them a shot.
Right. Question from Anonymous about any advice you've got for people returning to work from maternity or having had a career break. And I know, the Emporium, you've got a very strong track record in terms of people hiring people with disabilities. Do you have opportunities for people to do flexible working? I know it's something that we've been involved in. I know that quite a lot of people now are trying to encourage more flexible working. Is that something that's feasible within your productions?
I think it depends on the person. I've had 2 children and a long career, and been, on both occasions I was contract, I was freelance, and interestingly, on both occasions went back into really interesting roles. I think that it's hard, it's hard. Having kids and having to think about who's going to look after them, especially during the holidays and once they start school, it's really difficult. And don't let anybody tell you it's not. But there are solutions and there are ways around it. And sometimes you have to flex your career to fit in with that. Obviously before I had kids, I was always off and away and directing everywhere and around the country and loved it. But once you've got to get home at 6:30 for your child, everything changes, and that's life. And you make choices, but you have to make the choices that both fit the career you want and the home life you want. And you know what? Something has to give.
I mean, my experience of a lot of mums is they tend to get the job done. They come into work and they get a lot done, and then they go home and pick up the kids. And if they get the job done, then they're great. And I've had great experiences because they just tend to be really organised. It's a generalisation, but it's been my experience that they come in and work really hard, and they want to work hard, but they also want to get away at a certain time or on a certain day. And if they do the job, that's great. And I've had great experiences with that, so we're totally open to that.
Totally. And I absolutely, will always promote the working with people who have home lives, but they've made a decision and about what they want out of their careers, or hopefully they have, and then it's up to them to find the job that fits with that. I think that it's very hard for a company to say, oh, let's try and second guess what everybody wants. I think it's important for working mums to say, this is what I want, this is what I need. And if you're great, and because like everybody we employ, if we want to employ you, then where there's a will, there's a way.
That's what edit producing is quite a good role often, isn't it, for people of their experience. Slightly more regular, does involve being on location.
Yeah. I think I think that everybody has something in their life that makes working non-stop, flat out, quite difficult. And we just have to find our ways around it, don't we?
Great. Well, listen, one last question I'm going to ask, because it feels like it ties up well, but I'm conscious we're sort of out of time. Adam asking, how can we apply to work for Emporium? Is it only through the talent manager? I'm tempted to say yes, but you can answer that.
If we have specific jobs, we always advertise them through Talent Manager. We love Talent Manager, and we get a very high caliber of applicant through Talent Manager. We will try and be specific in our adverts about, you know, what skills we need. And, you know, I think that, you know, we try to be good, and, you know, I do encourage everybody who's putting adverts up to always reply, and, you know, just to at least let everyone know that they've been considered, because we read every single application, because, you know, you never know when you're going to miss a gem if you don't open every box. And then obviously we have info@emporiumproductions.co.uk, where, you know, we will put people's CVs on a kind of like internal talent list, but you need to say on your CV that you're happy for us to keep your CV, obviously, data protection and all that malarkey. So you know, you can do that, but if we haven't got a role, then what you're doing is making yourselves known to us. So you know, we'll get back to you and say thank you very much, that's really useful to have that, but any particular role we have, then we will advertise it.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much, all of you. Thank you all for listening. I'm sorry we didn't really have time to get through everybody's questions. I'll try and field some of those through and see if we can answer those different ones.
If anybody's got a question I think I could help them with, then they're more than welcome to write to me on the Talent Manager. I'm on Talent Manager as a series producer, freelancer, Simon Greenwood. So if they want to write me a short note, then I'm more than happy to try and answer it or put them in the right direction.
Brilliant. Thank you all very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope it's been useful, and we will catch up with you all soon.
Thank you.